So I've been covering Dune on this channel for about a year now. When I initially read Dune about 3 years ago, I was immediately blown away by it. The sheer scale of it was just awe-inspiring. Frank Herbert just kind of throws you into the world without really any explanation, and he just throws all these crazy words at you like Bene Gesserit and Kwisatz Haderach, and you immediately get the sense that this is an incredibly detailed and rich world. The first chapter with the Reverend Mother and the Gom Jabbar totally hooked me. There is such an air of mystery about what's going on, and the reader is getting all of this from Paul's point of view. He's just as confused as we are about what's going on with this weird box and this strange old woman. And so much is set up in this first chapter, the nature of the Bene Gesserit order and how they operate. Paul immediately guesses their involvement in politics, and Gaius Helimohaim is shocked at how he figured this out on so few clues. We learn about the Kwisatz Haderach in this chapter, and we learn about the Truth-Sayer drug. The Butlerian Jihad is brought up in this chapter. And that's arguably the most crucial point in the history of the Dune universe, because it shifted the entire course of all of human history. So many things that come into play later are masterfully placed into this chapter. So much is given to us just in the opening, and that's just part of the reason why I think it's easy for some people to get overwhelmed when reading Dune for the first time, because they're just kind of given all this information at once. It's more than entertainment, really. Dune is a high form of art. It's meant to transform the mind of the reader. Reading Dune, you immediately get the sense that you're reading something that's really special. These are different kinds of characters because, yes, they are human, but they are much more evolved than us. So it's interesting to view the world through the eyes of someone that's extremely sensitive to minutia and their environment, someone that's operating on a level of awareness that we can't even fathom. Reading from the perspective of characters like Paul and Jessica kind of pushes the reader to want to find ways to become more aware in their own life. It certainly had that effect on me, and I think that may be what Herbert intended with these books, in part, because he believed that we as humans use technology as a crutch. The humans in the Dune universe have to rely on themselves instead. So, through Dune, Frank Herbert is attempting to raise the reader's awareness and to encourage the reader to seek to better themselves. At least that's my interpretation. While I, in general, think technology is a good thing, I do think it's important to continuously improve yourself, because stagnation is death. And that is also one of the key motifs of the Dune series. Hello everyone in the chat that's just getting here. We're talking about Dune now, but we're going to cover multiple topics on this live stream. We're going to talk about A Song of Ice and Fire in a little bit. We're going to talk about some Mist of Avalon. And then in the end, we're going to do a Q&A, and I'm going to answer some of you guys' questions, and we can just talk about whatever you guys want. Alright, now where was I? Frank Herbert said that he wrote the Dune saga as a way to warn people against charismatic leaders. And yes, he did say this. My Ultimate Guide to Dune Messiah video opens with an audio clip of him uttering those very words. And this is, regardless of political alignment, he is saying that just because someone is charismatic and you agree with them on some things, does not mean that they're right about everything. And that does not mean that they are immune to corruption and bias. He's not completely saying don't trust leaders, but he is saying always question what they do. Always. Even if you like them, even if you are totally sure that they would never do anything wrong or anything to hurt the people. People can develop this cult-like mentality. And this kind of leader worship leads to fanaticism. Paul is basically the most extreme example of this in history. Frank Herbert is showing us how something like this would look if it happened to an interplanetary civilization containing hundreds of inhabited worlds. Paul is essentially a cult leader with a gigantic cult. A cult that's gotten so massive that It's not even truly under his control anymore, and other people with their own motives and own goals have taken control of certain aspects of it and are now committing atrocities in his name. Dune is a series that's very much about religion and politics, and it's almost funny because no matter what I say on this channel, if I mention anything political, many people don't react well, even if it was something that I thought was totally benign. And a lot of times I see people telling me that I just need to separate real world politics from Dune. Well, firstly, I don't think that I go out of my way to inject real world politics into my videos. I never mention politicians. I rarely do ever reference real political events in the political world. But the thing is, if there was a channel that did do that, I wouldn't fault them for it, because you cannot separate science fiction from the real world. These novels are about us. Frank Herbert is showing us a possible future for humanity. He's using science fiction in order to deliver these more complex ideas about the nature of politics and religion and government. Whenever I talk about politics on my channel, however, it's in the context of the Dune universe. I generally let you guys in the comment section apply that to what you see around you in the real world. I have thought about delving deeper into discussing the novels in the context of what's going on in the real world right now, but that may be opening up a can of worms that I'm not yet prepared to deal with. So I don't know if I'm ready for that just yet. Okay, so here the new Dune adaptation is going well. I follow Brian Herbert on Twitter, and he says that each script is getting better and better, so that's promising news. I recently watched Denis Villeneuve's Bladerunner 2049, and I was really blown away by it. It had such a huge, epic scale. It was quiet and epic and just like heady and cerebral, and it was just a beautiful science fiction movie, way better than I imagined it would be. People told me that it was good, but it just hit me in all the right places, and it really worked for me and my sensibilities personally. I'm really hoping that Villeneuve can bring the scale of Blade Runner to the Dune movies. Dune is definitely going to be harder to adapt for sure. I mean, there's way more characters in general, and just way more going on in Dune. Watching Blade Runner, I constantly wanted to know more. I was totally immersed in the society and in that world. I think that it will be good if people that have never read Dune and never seen any of the adaptations to get the urge to learn more about the Dune universe after seeing Villeneuve's version. But at the same time, I hope that the book fans like me and many of you guys don't feel when seeing the movies that they aren't in-depth enough. The movies will have to be able to imply that same sense of grandeur that the book implies as early as that opening chapter. And like I said before, I'm excited for this movie, and I'm even more excited now that I've seen Blade Runner. And as far as I'm concerned, Blade Runner is a must-see. I know a few people didn't like it, people said it was boring, but people tend to say that movies that I really like are boring. I don't know, maybe I'm just like into the more slower storytelling, because that for me, when there's a slower story, you really have time to just kind of exist in that world and become a part of it, and that just really hooks me, and I really am grabbed by that type of storytelling, and I just really enjoyed Blade Runner for that reason, and I am very excited for Dune.